All right, so this is what I have so far for my shapes. And then in order to be able to see what I need to still add, even though I filled in these big background blocking shapes, which cover everything up because they're all at 100%, I took my background layer and I made a duplicate of it with Command J, and then I click and dragged that up to the very top, and then I simply took the opacity of that layer down about halfway. So it's informing those shapes. I can even take it down more than halfway if I like. And the first thing I can do with that is change these shapes. So we're going to practice a lot about layer selections now. And it gets harder now that I have a low opacity layer floating above everything. The way that makes it a little bit more difficult is I can no longer just use the Move tool with Auto Select checked, because let's say I want the purple layer. Well, if I click on the purple, it's still going to always select the layer that's floating on top because I can see through it. So I uncheck the Auto Select, and instead I just need to be very mindful of which layer I'm affecting by using the little eyeball to know which layer it is. So now that I'm on the rectangle tool, I can hit Command T, and then I can work to distort it to kind of fit this landscape a little bit closer, like so. Now, why am I not seeing what I just did? Well, it's because that purple is below the beige here. So let me move the beige. Again, it's all about layer organization down underneath. So when you're thinking about layer shapes, think of them like cutouts of pieces of paper. And it doesn't make any sense for me to cut both of these into a shape, right? I just need the one on top to cut out the shape I want. Now I need to add another shape for these mountains. So I'm going to select on the purple, and instead of creating a new shape layer, like so, I can also just duplicate what I had before. So I can hit Command J, and then I can work with that and transform it into exactly what I need if I want to. Now the warp tool is great, but it won't give you what's called undercuts. So that's why I need to add on shapes. And as long as I don't have a stroke turned on, an outline turned on, I should be able to mimic the important features of these shapes pretty accurately. And it's like rolling dough, just pushing and pulling at the corners. I have a very weird wireframe going right now. Let's try to simplify it a little bit. There we go. So think of warp like a screen of chicken wire. And you can pull it at the corners, or you can pull it in between the anchors. And you can get very complex shapes there. Or you can just use your shape tool. And then Command T, rotate it, warp it as you see fit. I'm going to try to keep it fairly simple, so I don't need everything to match so beautifully or to be as warped as everything else. But when you want to warp, right-click within the transform square, and you'll have these other options. The distort options, the warp options, the skew options. And now that's a close enough shape to what I want over here. I'll just do Command J and duplicate it, and then just move that new shape over and play with it over here. You don't always need to use the fancy tools either. Just scale and rotate. Just the basic free transform tools are pretty effective. And now that I have the layer select option turned off on the move tool, I don't need to worry so much about accidentally selecting the wrong layer. I'm only going to select the layer if I physically select it within the layer window. Just go a little higher right there. And then I'm going to duplicate that again and bring it over. And just like stacking up cutouts of paper, it's only the one on top that matters for finalizing the shape. All right, so I've got that background now. Now I want to play with that arm and that hand, get that shape right. So I'm going to build a new shape right on top of this arm shape, which should match the shape of the layer I selected. And it will be on top of everything. Let's distort it. I'm not going to try to define each finger. Instead, I'm going to do kind of the big wedge for the fingers, and then I'll do a separate shape for the thumb. I'm right here, so it should match all of those settings when I do a new shape tool here. A long rectangle, just like that. Okay. So there's a lot of details within here that actually aren't all that important. So I have to decide what are the details that are important. Well, this arm and hand are important. So one way, if I don't want to have to look through all of these and turn them on and off, figure out which one is the hand I just created, I can just turn off that guidance layer that's floating above everything and turn back on the auto select, and then click on one of these. To make the arm on the other side what you see of it, for instance. Then I'm going to teach you a few shortcuts for how to move your layers in order, just in case. Okay, so that works for his hand, but I want this underneath the pants now. So instead of clicking and dragging it under like so, let's say I don't really know where I want to move it. So if I hit Command right bracket, it will move up through the layers. If I hit Command left bracket, and these are right underneath minus and plus, so they're just good basic navigation shortcuts. It will move it down through the layers until it's where I want it to be. And then I want to cut out that hand shape because his fingers are spread, but instead of trying to change this shape with an undercut, I'm just going to do another little cutout of the purple. So now we're getting fairly detailed. So I'm going to select the purple. I'm going to create a new shape, but this time it's going to be polygon, three-sided. It's going to be a little triangle. Going to transform it, shrink it, fit it in. maybe something like that. And then it's there, I just need to hit Command right bracket and move it up above that hand. And then see how that works out. It's not quite in the right place. Let me shift it, move it over. There we go. I'm just going to tailor this tiny bit with warp just to fit that finger a little bit better. Tiny details. So you'll see that a shape can really be expressed just through or a hand can be expressed, something as complicated as a hand, through very simple shapes. Use Command plus to zoom in. I'm just going to push out a little bit on this side, push in a little bit on this side for this thumb to get that kind of gestural movement that's required. And now it's much more suggestive of the hand. Okay, so what else is actually necessary? So I actually like to have two background copies floating up above. One that's at a really low opacity, 19%, and one that's actually a pretty high opacity. Let's put it at 100%. Though that's a little too dark because it's just a photo of the actual work, so maybe about there. And that's so I can look at it at 100% and say, okay, what things am I missing? Well, this is an important little compositional feature, this top of the rock that's really shining the yellow light. So these two kind of logs. So that's something I want to add in. So I'm going to use the color of the sky and build a rectangle on top of that so I can steal those properties. So when I draw my new one, it should match those properties. And I'm going to hit Command right bracket to bring it up above so I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to start transforming it. And warping it as needed. What's tough about doing this shape composition to Edwin's work is almost all of his stuff features layers of transparency. You know, so this log is actually going over the pants. Not this, it looks like a log, but it's just, I think it's just the top of the rocks. And so that's kind of interesting. But by understanding layers, I can do that too. I can bring this over the top. And I can even, with a shape layer, take its individual opacity down a little bit. So it's showing through. But instead of doing it to the log, or not to the log, to the top of the rocks, I'm going to do it to the pants. I'm just going to take the pants opacity down a tiny bit and then move what I just created underneath that. And so you'll get that kind of transparent ghosting effect, which is what's in the work, the finished work. All right. So many options to play with. The only thing that would be wrong for this is to get too caught up into perfecting little details. That is not what this is about. This is about just playing with these shape tools, kind of understanding their power. Just using the more refined transform tools as well. So he's got a little bit of space between his pants there. So first I'm going to use the purple. That's why having these background shapes is very helpful, because it shows you what the negative space is.